Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Abhishek Singh, and the budget coverage on Mint continues. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, as you know, in her budget speech on Tuesday, scrapped the angel tax for all investors. This has been a long standing demand of the venture investors, who, of course, hailed the abolition of the decade old tax regime as a huge reform. To talk about its impact, we're joined by Rajan Navani. Thank you for taking out the time and talking to us, Mr. Navani.
Thank you, Abhishek. Pleasure to be here with you.
Now, before we start talking about, of course, the scrapping of angel tax and LTCG and other aspects, specific aspects of the budget, let's quickly get your initial views on the budget out of the way.
Yeah, no, I think for us, I think it's been a very good budget, particularly when you look at it from a fiscal consolidation perspective. You look at the honorable finance minister being able to keep the fiscal deficit actually lower than the 5.1% projected 4.9. And then also directionally, mentioning that it'll move towards 4.5. I think it gives confidence to industry when you're looking at investing over the longer term. I think the nine buckets. Which the honorable finance minister talked about. I think each of those buckets are very, very meaningful, and I think how they get populated over the next few years. So my on an industry would like to urge that if we keep those same buckets, right, new generation reforms, innovation, even resilience in and productivity in agriculture, for example. I mean, green energy. So I think all of these are directionally correct indications to enable industry to invest in capex, to kind of see how we can bring in a large amount of global participation. You saw corporate tax for foreign companies going down. So I think from the economic side, from the ability to understand a holistic impact for India, we've not seen finance ministers in the past talk about skilling and capital formation, as well as technology, and many such aspects in one statement, right? I think it'll bring about greater, I think, trust between youth, industry, government, internships. So I think a lot there, and it will be now important to see how it gets executed and how it is built upon over the next few years.
So, more hits than misses?
I think so. Yeah, yeah. Few misses, but I think as I said, if we look at it from a building upon directional kind of a view, as I said, many things will happen. Like I think there was one statement on land, labor, all in the new age and next generation reforms, right? I think these will take time, right? Probably may not happen right away, or what extent, but as long as we are making ease of doing business clearly, simpler, better, more rationalized. I think these are all indicators, in the path ahead, which I think is something that we should be continuing to see in the forthcoming budgets.
Right. And the reason I started talking about the angel tax scrapping right in the introduction of the interview was because that's one aspect which I really wanted to talk to you about. So, if you could throw some light on this aspect, the kind of impact the scrapping of angel tax is going to have in terms of, spurring investment in Indian startups, which, by the way, was struggling throughout COVID and after that as well to raise more capital. All of a sudden, many of them will suddenly become viable for investors.
No, absolutely. Actually, as a matter of fact, I always say, angel investing is, you coming in as an angel into a company, to help the company soar and support it, right? The word itself means, supporting, building an entrepreneur, etc. And then you add the word tax. I mean, it was, it just didn't make sense. I think we were the only country in the world that had anything like this. So, really happy that it has finally been abolished. As a matter of fact, I think there are a lot of pending cases, etc., with small startups and many startups, that are
Yeah.
there from the past. And, I would strongly urge the honorable finance minister and the ministry to look at how those can get resolved, so that startups that have been built over these last several years and will continue to drive the growth engine of of India, it's extremely important, and I think this is a big one to put it, and clarify and put it at rest once and for all. What it will strongly do is, really bring in good amount of, family office, early stage capital, which was affecting businesses. I think even businesses and new age companies and startups now will use, funding from, say, angels, etc., VC community, because, it was going to apply to foreign companies, foreign VCs investing in India. So I think, a lot has now got answered from that. And I think, when we look at India's position in the world, right? As we are, we become the third largest economy. We do have very large companies, but nowhere close to what the US and China has, right? I mean, very large companies in the top 100. We hardly have, two, three, four, maybe. And, whereas if you look at US and China a lot, but we will have many mid-sized companies that will become large, which will work with large global companies. And I always say India will become a super partner to the world, and through that become a superpower, not the traditional way. And I think that's the beauty. And to encourage entrepreneurship and to see how that can flower, I think abolishment of angel tax is a very, very welcome step. I definitely see a lot more investments going into startups, into scale up. I think, the clarion call now is for scale up India. And given that this is in the unlisted space, it will also now spur more investment, given that, the long term capital gains also stand corrected.
Right. And another aspect which I wanted to talk to you about is CAPEX. As far as CAPEX is concerned, it was the government which has been doing heavy lifting on that front so far. Between 2019 and 2024, in fact, the government CAPEX has increased by, in fact, it has multiplied by a factor of three. But the government's hope at the same time was that the government, that this will also spur private sector CAPEX. That hasn't really been the case. What do you think is holding the industry back?
I think, see, there are multiple challenges. I think, if you look at it today, the world is at its, I would say, the most critical, the largest, the most disruptive technological revolution ever, right? We've never had so many different competing technologies coming in, at the same time. You see 6G, you see Gen AI, you see new materials, you see sustainability, energy, you see green. I mean, there are so many changes happening at the same time, right? So for industry, as we are picking up, sectors, where do you invest? How do you, invest in capex? It is increasingly becoming difficult to invest from the long term. That is, of course, a challenge from a private sector perspective. Ease of doing business, etc. As I said, from a manufacturing standpoint, etc., has also, kind of affected, I think, in the past a little bit. So I think directionally, make in India, not only for India, from India for the world, are themes that now we have to see, unlock further. I think the PLI scheme was a great scheme to get this entire thing started. We've seen significant change due to that, but I think that needs to be strengthened further. And therefore I said, these 9 buckets, how do we year on year improve those parameters, look at those metrics as a country, and prioritize what will drive further capex and investment. The government continuing to invest in infrastructure is definitely a big one. But I think even infrastructure will change. Digital public infrastructure that the government has invested in is going to enable so many new kinds of innovations that will happen. And now from payments, it's moving into, health and agriculture, are all strong parameters, strong indicators, as far as we're concerned, to see how new solutions, both for India and for the world, will get built. So I think, also interest rates, etc., as they rationalize a little further, I think the lowering of, corporate, tax rates, etc., will also add to, more investments from the private sector. But it is going to be, as I said earlier, a joint effort, to get a Viksit Bharat, government, industry, youth, right? Because we've got this huge manpower potential, both for manufacturing and services, that is going to, spur India's position globally. So I think all of these are strong indicators. I think, while we talked of the angel tax, I want to highlight the impact of the long-term capital gains, which has increased, of course, for listed equities, but which its reduction for unlisted equities from a 20 odd percent plus surcharge to a 12.5, I think is a big boost. And I think
Uh,
that will happen at a far greater pace, if you see, compared to what it has been in the past. So again, as I said, I'm optimistic about investments, through multiple structures going in. Into Indian industry, into Indian startup ecosystem, into new age businesses, MSMEs, helping them spur their growth as they continue to scale up. And I would strongly also believe that large scale industries will continue to support as India plus one, I mean China plus one, and now India becoming that base for the rest of the world continues to show greater potential.
I think the economic cartography required to draw that Viksit Bharat map definitely requires the kind of partnership which the government is hoping the private sector will sort of, start contributing to. The government has been claiming that it's been doing its part. And hopefully, as you were saying, going forward, we will see a lot more of that. And in fact, there are so many more things that we should talk about, but I think we will leave that for another day. And considering that's all the time that you had, so on that note, thank you so much for taking other time and talking to us. Thank you.
No, thank you, Abhishek. Last point, since you mentioned that, CI has
Yes.
taken on a very large agenda on CI on India at 100. Not only has it been leading in India at 75 initiative, and I share that, and I will tell you that there is tremendous commitment from Indian industry to work closely with government, with other stakeholders, to really see this vision of a developed India. Because never in the history of mankind, as a democratically elected, country of over a billion people, transformed itself, from an underdeveloped to a developed country. So it's a very opportune time, and I think it's something that we should, capture together. So again, thank you for having me here with you.
Thank you.